Welcome to As the Key Turns. I'm David Lehman, and I spent 23 years in the Supermax prison located at USP Marion. And today I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that was going on in the news lately. We have a new administration, the Trump administration, and one of the things that they're doing is cutting costs. Now, I am a businessman, like say this building right here is 9,000 square feet. It's in Guyana. I have this floor is what I live on, but below me is real estate investment. I rent the stuff out. And the same thing in America. I live in a 3,700 square foot house in America. And I have over 100,000 square feet of rental property in two counties. Yeah, in two counties in the state of Illinois. I own some other real estate in Missouri and Oregon. So yes, I'm a retired prison guard, not a supervisor, not on any of the special teams, none of that stuff, just an ordinary guy. And I built a multi-million-dollar real estate empire by just using common sense. Now that you have these people that are moving into government who are similar backgrounds, I guess. Of course, they're doing it with billions of dollars, and I'm only doing it with millions of dollars. So I don't put myself in the category of, Trump's, Musk's, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a multi-billion-dollar person. I'm just a simple prison guard who had a wife, or who has a wife that used to be a babysitter, and that's how we built this empire. Part of it is I don't waste money on a bunch of unnecessary nonsense. Like you see these influencers that are telling you about, well, I have a Maserati and I have a Bugatti, and why? Yeah, I could afford a Rolls Royce for $350,000 or $500,000. Why would I do that? To impress strangers, people that don't know me? Hey, look, there goes a guy in a Rolls Royce. Who cares? Doesn't improve my life. So anyway, what I'd like to talk about today, I got some notes here. What I'd like to talk about today is the things that could have happened in the Bureau of Prisons when I was working there, and I can only talk about my personal experience. I'm sure that there are many other people who had similar or even much better ideas than what I'm about to tell you about. At one point, the Bureau of Prisons, at least at USP Marion, had this fabulous idea that they should listen to people's suggestions. And wow, what a great idea. Listen to a suggestion. So they put out these suggestion boxes and people put their suggestions in the suggestion box, and then they picked out a few of them that didn't save a dime and things like that. So there was this guy, and let me get it correct. He wrote a book, and it's called It's Your Ship, Management Techniques from the Best Damn Ship in the Navy by Michael Abrashoff. And they made management read this book, or they wanted them to read this book. So they bought 40 or 50 of these books by this, I think he was a retired lieutenant commander when he wrote this book. He was in charge of the Benfield ship, and he told his experiences and how he listened to everybody's suggestion and implemented some of them, from some of the brand newest newbies to the old salts. And so since they were doing that, I got a copy of it, and I read the book, and it was a fabulous book. By the way, I'm not getting paid for this endorsement, but I think it's like $10 or something you could pay for it on one of those sites that you buy books at, and you can purchase one of these. And I would suggest that you do that if you are in management at any level. I use this very techniques that this guy expounds when I'm dealing with my employees, and I have some employees. I got like 4 employees in various parts of the world, since my real estate empire actually is on, let's see, I'm in 3 continents, 3 countries, 3 states, and 3 states. So, you know, I'm pretty widely diversified. Now, some of the things that I suggested to the BOP, which would have saved them a lot of money, and they ignored every single one of them. Let's start out with a big one first. The biggest one that I did, the most funny, I guess you would say, was Bureau of Prisons cooks an awful lot of food for hundreds of prisoners at one time, and they have a lot of waste oil like restaurants do. And I had developed, through research, the technique to take the waste oil and convert it into biodiesel. And that had 2 effects. One was it converted a hazardous material, because you can't just take this stuff and dump it on the ground or throw it in the trash or pour it down the drain. It's a biohazard, I guess, and it has to be disposed of in an approved manner. So the Bureau of Prisons, you know, they have people come and haul it away, and they pay them to do that. Restaurants did the same thing. I ended up knowing a guy whose brother ran a restaurant locally in Southern Illinois, and I went and picked up their oil, and then they had to call the guy Les to pick up the oil. And I used it to convert into biodiesel, and I had an old ambulance that I used, because ambulances have like lots of little drawers and things in it, and I put tools and materials in there so that when I went somewhere I could do lots of repairs. I didn't have to go run around getting tools and getting materials. I had it all right there in an ambulance, or a former ambulance. And so I ran that thing with biodiesel that I manufactured from waste oil, in my case from a restaurant, from a guy that I knew. I had suggested that the Bureau of Prisons turn over all their waste oil to me, but we can't do that because we have a contract with a guy, and besides that, we wouldn't want to give me, an employee, anything that would be valuable from the prison, because they just can't do that, apparently, according to them. Probably a lie, but whatever. So they didn't do it. Over 2.5 years later, the regional director said, hey, I got this great idea. We could use the waste oil from the Bureau to manufacture biodiesel, and we could run all of our equipment that uses diesel for very little, pennies a gallon. And everybody said, what a fabulous idea. The exact same people that said that if we use biodiesel it will destroy our equipment, all of a sudden they said, wow, it will be even better for our equipment than regular diesel. So yeah, whatever. And then I said, hey, remember when I suggested it? Well, you didn't know what you were doing. Well, what happened was, at least at USP Marion, is that they never implemented this suggestion because they didn't have anybody there that knew how to make biodiesel, except me, of course. And because no one in management knew how to do it, because you can only trust people who are lieutenants and above, because they're managers. And regular old prison guards are too stupid to pull off anything like manufacture their own diesel. So it never went anywhere. So his great suggestion amounted to zero. So they saved nothing. And today, nothing has changed. Bunch of other suggestions that I made that would have saved money that's been totally ignored. Now, every one of these suggestions that I'm talking about have been totally ignored. They should be implemented even today. Now, we'll see what this new administration who is into cost cutting, if they'll do that. When you give inmates, they just give this big box, right? Big giant box of soap. And what the inmates do, and they're them little soaps, you know, like you get at the hotel, or you used to get at the hotel. And what they do is they put one in each hand, and then they go to their shower, and then they rub themselves all over using both hands at the same time. And then they drop the soap and walk and rinse off and walk away. So every shower of every inmate takes 2 bars of soap. And then at the end, when it's all done, they scrape up we have the orderlies go in there and scrape up all these dozens and dozens of bars of soap and throw them away. So they're never fully utilized at all for anything. We used to ration out the toilet paper. Like, you have to give me, your little roll of inside, and then the inmate would get a new roll based on, he gave me back his little toilet paper roll, and I gave him another one. So he only has one roll at a time. Well, the administrative people, like the warden and the associate wardens and those kind of people, they always said, well, I would give it to you, as many as you want, but it's those hacks, those prison guards, man, they're the ones restricting you. I would give it to you. So what they do is that they want to get us stabbed because, hey man, the boss said that we could have it, but you evil, no good bastard, you are the one restricting me on how much I can have. And if I just murder you, then maybe I'll get more. And so I said, hey, why don't we, and I told all the other prison guards this, why don't we just push the boxes, these giant cases of toilet paper, just push it out there onto the thing, just like the warden said, give them as much as they want, right? That's what he told the inmate. So just push it out there, let them take it all. And they do. They took it all. It was like that toilet paper thing, when during COVID, where everybody panicked and said, oh my God, I got to get all the toilet paper in the store. So that's what the inmates did. And you'd go by one of their cells, and they've got 30 and 40 rolls in there. And they're using one entire roll. They dip it in water, and then they wipe the floor off and throw it away. So they use an entire roll to wipe their floor. That kind of stuff. They just total wasted. And then the people out at the warehouse started complaining, hey man, we can't get enough trucks of toilet paper in here to give these 500 inmates all the toilet paper they want. We're running out of money. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And then they came down and said, well, you need to start restricting it. Why? You told them they could have all they want. So that's what we're going to do. As far as I know, they're still doing it. Just give them all they want. Inmates are seen each and every day, twice a day, by a registered nurse. I mean, do you get seen twice a day by a registered nurse? He comes by and says, hey, how you doing? Feeling sad? Do you got a little cramp in one of your toes? Anything like that going on today? Do you need some aspirin for free? The things that we pay for. You need some aspirin for free? Well, they do that constantly. The inmate doesn't even have to ask for anything. They're just given it. They get free dental work. Whether they need it or not, they still bring them in, do the little cleanings and things just like you get. They get paid. Like we have them mop these floors like 4 times a day, and we pay them to do that. It's like we're paying slave labor. It's like, why are we paying these people? Well, it motivates them. Really? How about if we motivate them by saying, we won't send you to the hole if you refuse to mop this floor? That kind of thing. They have this useless mental counseling, like they have big groups, right? And then they say, okay, is anybody not feeling like, happy and well-adjusted? Well, these inmates aren't going to talk in front of other inmates. If anybody's ever been to counseling of any kind, it's kind of a personal thing. You go into this room all by yourself, and you and your counselor, and you discuss, your childhood trauma or whatever. In my case, it was all the violence that I've been subjected to, and that's why I'm jumpy and have, PTSD and that stuff. But I'm all better now. Well, I don't try to hit people with cans in the supermarket anymore. So, Julie did a good job. They use religion to get a lot of special things. So like if you claim that you're Muslim, well, now you can't eat normal food. You can't eat pork. You got to have, a special halal meals. And those are really expensive. So, but you're allowed to do that. And the same thing if you're Jewish or whatever, right? So most people don't realize this, but all Muslims can eat anything a Jew can eat. So if there's a special meal that only, Jewish people need, to meet their dietary restrictions. Muslims can do the same thing. So if we had a bunch of rabbis show up and kill the cows or whatever and process the meat, then that meat could be used for our Muslim inmates as well. And since there's very few Jews, a lot more people claiming to be Muslim, why don't we grow our own cows? You know, I mean, we got all this grass all over the whole place. It's all fenced in, and we can't have a cow because, you know, it cuts into, and here's another thing too. If we grew our own food, which was another suggestion, at the prison, it would cut into the kickback, I mean, the amount of money that is going out into the community. And of course, there's no kickbacks or anything, you know, to the Bureau of Prisons. I mean, you know, that would be like bribery and stuff. Even though that, you know, there was a guy recently convicted of that and sentenced to prison because they, you know, someone turned him in. What happened in that case was they were contracting out for services like food and things, you know, and the guy who made the decision said, hey, I have a business on the outside which is a total scam, and you need to purchase items from my business that I've hidden through, you know, shell companies and my wife's name and that sort of stuff. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to get the contract to supply these goods and services to the Bureau. So he got caught at it, and, you know, they got a few months in jail and a pittance of a fine. But he did lose his you know, $70,000, $80,000 a year job and all the benefits and the retirement and everything. He lost all of that. So if we produced our own food at the Bureau of Prisons, because, you know, we have this mass amount of labor and they're not doing anything, and we could even produce, like, say, a bunch of corn, make our own corn oil and produce our own fuel if we did that, you know, because, like, that's what they're doing in the outside community. It's not that difficult if you know what to do. There would be less opportunity for kickbacks. That's just what I'm saying. Okay, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just telling you that there would be less opportunity for more kickbacks, like at least in that one guy's case. And these people have refused over and over all these suggestions to save on the $2 billion budget that you're spending to house all these criminals. Things like, well, when we shut down for a temporary time, like we were shut down for like a couple of months, and we moved out all the inmates. They had all these security lights which cost tens of thousands of dollars a month to have all these lights on. I mean, they burn an enormous amount of power. And that caused the local power company to burn more coal, which caused more global warming. And, you know, we're all into let's save global warming. So I said, why don't we shut off all the security lights? Oh, no, we can't do that. Why can't we do that? Because hordes of people from Marion are going to come and jump our 12-foot fence with the dozens of rolls of razor wire and steal what? Like, what would they steal? The grass? Do you know what's outside the buildings? Very little. So if I ran around outside, maybe I could steal, I don't know, I could start rolling up the chain link fence or something. And they were afraid that, you know, people would come and steal the fence or some nonsense. Maybe they would cut down the high mast lights, you know, like are on the highway and stuff. People do it all the time, right? They saw down the high mast light and then they steal it. Well, they were afraid they would do that at a high security prison, you know, so, all right. I was a part-time employee of the United States Coast Guard. I volunteered during 9/11, right after 9/11, because for some reason I felt, wow, I have all these military skills, they're not being used anymore. My wife threw a fit and said, my God, we're not doing that shit that happened last time where the Army called you and they wanted to send you off to God knows where and get you killed. I'm not doing that. And I said, well, how about the Coast Guard? They're stationed on the coast. We don't actually leave the United States. Well, my unit wouldn't leave the United States. Fine, that would be okay. You can help your nation that way. So I made a deal with the wife. So they had a lot of things that they were doing there that they contracted out for. So I said, well, why don't we have our inmates travel to Paducah, Kentucky, which isn't that far from USP Marion, an hour and a half or so by car. So it'd be a 3-hour round trip. And say for 5 hours, why don't we have the inmates cut the grass, paint things, repair stuff? I mean, they do that at the other government facilities. Well, the warden said, well, we can't do that unless they request it. Okay, so I got them to request it. Well, we can't do that because there's nobody trained to handle inmates there. Duh, how about me? Well, we don't have transportation. They just kept making up more and more excuses. Well, there's another problem, there's another problem, there's another problem. Finally, they came out and said, well, we can't give them to you to do this because there's a possibility that people would look favorable upon you in your other organization in the Coast Guard, and they might be more likely to promote you or something because you saved them a lot of money and trouble and bother. And, you know, we wouldn't want anyone to get promoted because they did a good job. We will not tolerate that crap here at USP Marion. So, you know, that was the end of the thing. And that was after they came up with all these excuses, and I overcame each one of them. And then they finally said, well, we don't want to do it because it's you know, or someone like you. So some of the other things that they did was like, they had drug dealers at the camp. They were selling drugs. And so the head guy of the camp and his favorite drug dealer, they decided that what they would do was eliminate all of his competition, which they did. So the big drug dealer told on the little drug dealers, and then they got busted and shipped out. Well, they left the big drug dealer, and he had drugs in his pocket. So I caught him a couple of times with drugs on him, selling them. I witnessed it, turned it all in. Well, you know, we had an excuse or a problem, and they threw it all out every time. So I said, oh, okay, so what I got to do is get rid of this guy. So I knew that he's volatile because he gets away with everything. I mean, he's the child that helped the head guy, the camp administrator. So I went and inspected his stuff, and I left it a little messy. Well, he blew up and went insane. And I made sure that that happened while the warden was doing an inspection. And I got this guy screaming at me, I'll kill you, you're dead, you know, shit like that. And the warden said, hey man, you can't be threatening our staff. Screw you too. Lock him up. Well, then the camp administrator came to his rescue again and said, well, we're going to drop all the charges. And the warden said, no, you're not. I witnessed this, and we're not going to do that with my staff. So what the result of that was, since the inmate had gotten transferred, the warden transferred him like twice, and this camp administrator blocked it once and was ordered, you know, don't do that again. I'm your boss, and he's getting transferred. That's what happened. This guy had to get rid of me because, you know, I was breaking up his techniques, his system. See, what was happening was that this guy looked really good because look at all the people that he's catching selling drugs. Well, of course, this guy and his lackey, the big drug dealer, it's both of their advantage to turn in all these drug dealers. One, the head drug dealer gets to now sell drugs to everyone at the camp, and the camp administrator looked really good because he is busting all these guys. So, you know, it's how you get promoted, right? It's the Bureau of Prisons is full of this kind of stuff. So by partnering with this guy, he was looking much better, the camp administrator, and I screwed up the whole system. Kind of like what Trump's doing now in our government by screwing up their systems to, you know, they've got they've got a system down by which they're profiting from, the head guys are, and now these Trump or these business people are coming in and just boogering up the whole system, so that now they actually have to do their job and stuff. So, you know, it's just, so they had to get rid of me. So what they did is they had an inmate say, well, I was having a visit and I was cramming my hands down my wife's pants in violation of the rules of the visiting room, and that guy said that he would terminate my visit. I want to complain. I'm going to sue. You know, yeah, whatever. Like they never got sued before. So they had to transfer me out of there to get rid of me. And the camp administrator was always like, you know, you probably ought to retire. You ought to quit. And when I did retire, he was happy as hell that I was gone. It was pretty funny because I was screwing up his whole system and he couldn't do it anymore. Remember, they were worried to death that if I used prisoners at the Coast Guard to make the Coast Guard more efficient, to allow them to do more patrols and things like that, rather than stay at home and clean and repair their equipment, then that was a horrible thing. But if the camp administrator gets to use inmates to better his self, well, that's just the way things go, you know. One of the things that they need to do is get rid of people like that. And there's another category too. These people that jump on the bandwagon. Remember all the fake woman stuff? You know, it's a man, but he's pretending to be a girl, so they transfer this pretend woman to a female prison so that he can continue to rape, which is what he was in prison for anyway. Now he can rape the female prisoners. There's lawsuits about this going on right now as we speak, that men were transferred to all-female prisons, and the serial rapist that pretended to be a woman is now allowed to continue to rape women in prison, which is what he was in prison for to begin with. So, you know, that was a smooth move. How about if we get rid of them people? Look, if you went on with this fakeness, and oh, by the way, this might be my last video because of this, because they've warned me about this before. Fake women are men. That's it. The federal government's even come to the conclusion that there's only two genders. So when you put fake women, in other words, men, when you put him into a female prison and he rapes women, or he's having sex with women, duh. And brings up another thing. Would save a lot of money and a lot of time and trouble. When you have an all-female institution, why are men in there? Why are male staff in there? They can't hire enough women? I thought we were all into diversity. Why can't we hire all female staff to work in a female prison and all male staff to work in a male prison? When I first started at USP Marion, there were no women allowed to interact with the prisoners on their own. They always had to be escorted by male staff because we had really dangerous prisoners and they were afraid for their safety. Well, all that went out the window in later generations of staff. You know, women are they're a calming influence on a prison, sure. That's why after every visit that I had from a female nurse who was a very attractive lady, we had an incident within 15 or 20 minutes after she left, because these guys hadn't touched a woman in 20 years, and they see this beautiful lady come in there, interact with them, and they just lose it. I mean, okay, I don't blame them. They're human and male. So why are we having females working in male institutions that decide that they would love the inmate and then they go on crime sprees and have to be killed by the police? Why are we doing that? I mean, we want to take guns away from people because one person gets shot. Why don't we take females away from the male prisoners because some females, a very, very small minority, yes, act stupid. And same thing with the males. I mean, I worked at a female prison camp, And the guy that worked there with me on that shift told me, oh yeah, they walk one male out here a month. At least one male a month is walked out for inappropriate behavior with the female prisoners. It's like, oh, okay. They did things totally wasteful. Like, they had a shower that would run. It was on, a warm shower. So they were heating the water and paying for that, the energy to do that. And then they were paying for this water to run for 3 months that I'm aware of. It was running when I got there, and I'm there for 3 months, and it was running when I left. So who knows how long the shower was just continuously running and wasting the power to heat the water and the water. So, and plus, you know, you have to treat the wastewater, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't fix it because they were understaffed. But just, okay, we pay to cut the grass. We got all these inmates that got nothing to do, and we pay to cut the grass. When there's farmers that want to cut grass, roll it up and give it to their cattle, and would pay the Bureau to cut their grass. So it would be, we're not paying to have the service done. Someone's paying us to do the service for us. No, can't do that. No, you know. And it would give them a discount to feed their cattle too. Now, like I said before, you know, we had we can't grow our own food because we have to purchase the food so that people get contracts. And of course, you know, they don't do the kickback thing anymore because that one guy got arrested, right? So that's it. They even refuse donations. My business of storage, sometimes people don't pay. You've seen Storage Wars, right? People don't pay, they auction off the unit. Well, some people don't want to take the stuff because it's big and heavy and blah, blah, blah. One of them is a piano. I got this piano. It's a baby grand piano. It's worth a bunch of money, but I can't sell it and I can't get rid of it. Nobody will come and get it because I didn't know the joke. Remember the old joke, you know, where the piano falls out of the building or goes down the stairs or whatever and people run and flee? The reason they do that is because pianos are extraordinarily heavy. This baby grand would take like 5 guys to lift the sucker. It did take 5 guys to lift the thing. So I said, why don't I just donate it to the prison? Nope, can't accept that. We don't accept donations. Oh, why not? Because it would, oh, that's right, I forgot. It would get rid of this grand piano, and the inmates would have a piano to play and give them something constructive to do. But it might benefit me by disposing of an unwanted piano, and we can't tolerate anything like that. So all the books, you know, like the religious books that the churches donate to the Bureau of Prisons, I can't donate them. The piano and the other musical instruments, I can't donate. Well, I probably can now, but since they've done all this nonsense, why bother? So they wouldn't accept even a donation. You know, you could cut a lot of staff out of the Bureau of Prisons. They got a lot of superfluous stuff. Public relations, there's one. The warden secretary can't do public relations. You want to do a story about, you know, USP Marion, the warden secretary can't take you around and show you all the stuff that she knows about. No, we have to have a dedicated guy who sits in an office most of the time, twiddling his fingers, waiting for the phone to ring because some guy from an established place like ABC, CBS, Fox News, whatever calls. Now the YouTube influencers that do these long videos, documentaries, they're not allowed. We don't want them. But the established media, you know, the left-wing media, the ones that really see it the socialist way, well, we'll accept those people. But we got a guy that does that. We also have a guy called emergency coordinator. And what his job is to do is that if there's an emergency, he's the liaison officer between, say, the Bureau of Prisons and the local sheriff's department or the local fire department, because, you know, the inmates are burning down the place. And then, you know, he talks to the FBI and people like that, because apparently the warden is incapable of speaking to those people because he is far too important to be able to tell the local sheriff what he needs. we got to have a go-between guy who knows how to talk to the sheriff, because wardens can't do that. It's just far too beneath him to do that stuff. We got a local resource management, the local personnel guy, because they can't do that from far away, like when I make a phone call and say, hey, I'd like to retire or whatever. Oh, wait a minute, they did do that. That's located in Grand Prairie, Texas. So why do they have a local guy? So I can come in and do what? Oh, change my allotments and things, which I do on the computer. So that couldn't be handled at Grand Prairie either by one guy instead of, dozens and dozens of people throughout the Bureau. Right, yeah. They have a disciplinary officer that is local at USP Marion. And what he is, he's kind of like a judge, so like if an officer gets beat up, they write up a thing that says these inmates beat me up, and then the disciplinary officer says, I am restricting you and we're going to take away your commissary and whatever punishment that he can do. Now they have one at every institution. Now instead of doing that, why don't they have one, like they do with when a prisoner goes to court? He goes to a little room, he has a television in there, and then he interacts with them through like Skype or, FaceTime or something. And then this hearing officer would be able to do many more cases, just one right after another, at many different institutions. And then they only have to hire one guy and not 12 guys, that kind of thing. Why don't we do that? Well, that's a terrible thing. They have a regional director. A regional director, what they've done is that they've cut up the United States into regions. And there's several regions, and then these people report to Washington, D.C. Why? They can't have one so-called regional director in D.C. and then he handles all these little minor things and then he bumps it all up, because that's what they do with everything. They bump it all up to their higher up because they can't make a decision on their own. Regional directors are only the guys that come up with the idea of, hey, maybe we ought to make biodiesel. And then everybody says, what a great idea! And then they never do it because they don't have any expertise to do it, because the expertise they have, they said, well, he's just an officer and we don't want to, listen to him because he's an idiot. Even though we did get a book that said that, at least in the Navy, on a ship, this guy at the Benfield said, hey, I'll listen to anybody. So the guy that was scraping the paint on the side of the ship, he said, hey, why don't we take these bolts, which are like iron bolts, and they're making these big long rust streaks, why don't we replace them with stainless steel so they don't rust, and then we'd only have to paint like once a year instead of every 4 or 5 months. And we'll save A, a lot of money on paint, B, a lot of time that could have been spent on training, and C, we wouldn't have to do this job which actually doesn't make anyone better at being in the Navy other than we scrape paint. So they did that. They were able to save a bunch of money. They were able to put that money into their training and fuel, et cetera, et cetera. And then they became the top ship in the Navy because this guy said, why don't we just replace these bolts with stainless steel and we won't have to do the painting. And then the commander said, oh my God, what a great idea. It would allow us to become better. Well, we don't do that at USP Marion because we need these associate wardens. We got 2 of them, right? One for programs, which is a lot of useless crap, which is what supposedly we're teaching inmates to do what? Mop the same section of the floor over and over for which we pay them, and there's no actual real job training. We're not going to do that. So we got a guy over that, and then we got a guy over the, the actual institution where they're fixing things. They couldn't combine those two and just have one guy, because one guy has to walk around and feel important a lot and tell me about how important he is and how many hundreds of thousands that he's making off of just his legitimate job. Of course, he don't take any kickbacks either, because we don't do that in the Bureau. We contract it out fairly. And there was only that one guy that got arrested, And the reason he got arrested, right, was because the guy that he was scamming the money out of complained to the FBI, not the Bureau's Office of Responsibility, nothing like that. He went to the FBI and the FBI looked into it. That's how he got caught. And then there was the other guy, you know, that got caught getting the discounted car. You know, the FBI was monitoring that guy because he was a big crack dealer, and he had a legitimate business to launder his money, and he was doing this while locked up. And then one of our employees showed up to get a discounted car, any government car, with the inmate with him so that he could communicate, you know, to his criminal buddies. But we don't do that, except those guys in the Bureau of Prisons. Why do we even have Marion open? It doesn't have enough inmates. They have these huge complexes where they combine everything so that when they do purchase something, they can do so in bulk and save a lot of money. But USP Marion can't do that because it's this isolated prison in southern Illinois. It would save a lot of money if they just closed it and sent the inmates to other prisons. You know, then they'll say, well, they're a sex violator protection place. Like, they don't have something like that at the complexes because all the PC, which is protected custody, all the PC inmates are out in the open getting murdered every day, right? Isn't that how it works? Oh no, they do have special units for them. But they can't put these sex offenders in them for some reason. Because why? We're spending this money to do what? You know, and you know, when they transferred the place, made it a smaller, a lower, it went from Supermax to medium prison. You know, they removed the wire that wasn't doing anything. It was just wire on the fence. They removed it because we're not as high anymore. And then what they did with that wire, instead of like, I was like, oh my God, I could use that at my business, razor wire around the perimeter of my business to keep out the thieves. Man, this stuff's really expensive. I said, I wanted to purchase it. Well, no, we have to sell it for scrap. Great, fabulous. I want to purchase it for the scrap price. No, we can't sell it to you. We have to sell it to the contractor, the guy we made the deal with. And then he's going to do with it what he wants, right? So, you know, it went through the contracting process. And they sold it for scrap price, as opposed to I, who would have gave them a higher price because it wasn't allowed to go to bid, right? They just scrapped it. Wonder how that worked out. So that book, remember the book that I was telling you about where they talk about, you know, just listen to everybody? Well, they bought like cases of these things. I think it was like 60 or 80 of these books. It was an enormous amount. And they wanted all the lieutenants and above to read it. Well, they all didn't want to, and they didn't implement anything to do with it anyway. And I went down there and got a free book. They said, yeah, man, we're just going to throw them away. You can have one. So the Bureau of Prisons paid for all these books. No one read them, and they threw most of them away. I read them, implemented it into the strategy of my business, and it helped make millions of dollars for me personally. But I'm just a dumb prison guard who's married to a lady who did nothing more than babysit for her money. So we got a prison guard and a babysitter that have made millions of dollars because we own businesses, and we implemented all these suggestions that I made to the Bureau for free that they rejected. Now, I'm not telling you that I am some kind of super dude and I'm extremely intelligent. I'm telling you that there are people just like me in the Bureau making even better suggestions that saved even more money, and they're being ignored too. Now, if you like this video, by all means, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. I promise it won't kill you. And thanks for watching, and I'm sure that all of this would be ignored even if it was shown at the regional director's office, because I suggested they get rid of the regional director office because it's superfluous. You know, or that they show it at the national office in Washington, D.C. I'm pretty sure they ain't going to do any of this either. But thanks for watching.